This is The Length Legal. I'm Tony Albrecht. You know that thing that we tend to say when something is hard, that it's like a marathon? Building a business is a marathon, not a sprint. Parenting, marathon, not a sprint. Marriage, a marathon, not a sprint. Building a magnetic online presence, this thing I talk about, marathon, not a sprint. I want to reframe today how actually all these things are less like marathons and they're more like Big D's backyard ultra marathon. I'm going to give you 5 reasons in this little podcast why I believe that is the case. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue the same way, does it? It's building a business is not a marathon. It's a Big D's backyard ultra. It's a mouthful. And you have the problem that nobody knows what a Big D's backyard ultra is. I registered for that race last week up here in Ontario. It's about an hour and a half from my house in the woods around a lake north of Toronto. And I ran my first marathon when I was maybe 23. I'm 42 now. Over the last 20 years, I've basically done more than 10 races of a marathon or more. Most of those are 50K, which is like 31 miles. I did my first 100K race at 40, and then I did my second 100K at 41 last year in the Malibu Hills. Coming into 2025, I wanted to get 2 races on the calendar of 50 miles or more. And Big D's Backyard Ultra is the first one on my calendar for this year. And I didn't really appreciate how this thing is different than other races I've done until I started training for real last week. And it was only then that I started thinking about just how different this particular race is, this type of race, this what they call backyard ultras, is from your typical race, your typical marathon, even ultra marathon. Lay out for you what this race is like, and then jump into these 5 things that are why I think it applies to our lives, whether or not we run long races or not. The main dynamic that's different in this thing is that it's almost not even a race. So I registered for the 24-hour event. This race has a 6-hour event, a 12-hour event, and a 24-hour event. And it's basically a loop that is about 7 kilometers, about 4.1 miles. And for this 24-hour event, everybody comes up to the start line the way you would expect at a race. They have a cowbell or a gong of some sort. You go, bong. You go, and you have an hour to finish that loop. And if you don't finish lap, you're out of the race. You're out of the event. You can't start the next lap. And if you do finish in under an hour at 4 miles, which, that's a pretty 15 minutes a mile, is a pretty doable pace. That's almost like a fast walk if you're on flat ground. Then you need to be back at the start line at the beginning of the next hour. So every hour on the hour, the cowbell goes again and you start again. And so my intention, my goal for this thing is that 24 hours straight, I'm going to step up to that line and I'm going to start going again. I've never run anything like this. If I do it, it basically comes out to 100 miles. I do think my goal here is that it's going to at least be the longest I've ever covered, the most ground I've covered in one day. But that's neither here nor there for this podcast, because what I want to unpack is how just this tweak in dynamic, effectively, the 24-hour, I say race, but let's say event, you don't actually win. There's not actually a winner of the race. The person who finishes first doesn't win. The goal is just that at the end of that 24th lap, you're still standing, that you finish that 24th lap. It's a very different thing, isn't it? It was only when I was starting to think about my training and strategize that some of these different dynamics came into focus for me. So I want to talk about 5 things real quick about how Big D's Backyard Ultra unfolds that applies to this. This could be entrepreneurship. This could be developing your magnetic online presence in this digital arena. So number 1, you get resets. So in your typical marathon, like the bell goes and now you have to cover 26 miles. And you may have a plan where there are kind of stages, and you have aid stations along the way where you can stop to get a drink or get nutrition, but it's one thing, right? And you got that flow of people just going. They're always kind of pressing onward. In Big D's, everybody starts at the same time, at the hour, every hour on the hour. So you get, if you go out for a lap and you get back in 45 minutes, you have 15 minutes to do what you need to do. And then you get back up there and you go again. It's kind of a new thing. You're doing the same thing again. That's one way that thinking about the similarity, where if you're trying to show up, let's say on LinkedIn, our platform of choice, there is like a marathon-like quality to this. We have to show up consistently over time to start to see the benefits. And it can wear us down, but we have the ability to reset. We have the ability to step away, to rest, and then to come back the next day, the next week, the next month, and start again. That's one. Number two goes hand in hand with that. It's about replenishing. When I started doing races, and frankly, this has been true for most of the races that I've ever run, I have done what's called hitting the wall, and I more like run head on into the wall at full speed. And that's where you basically push too hard and then you run out of gas during the race. Oddly enough, the first race I've done where I did not really hit the wall was my last 100K in Malibu. 42 years old, a 60-mile race. I managed not to. I mean, it hurt. I was hurting bad at the end, but I did not full on just run in that wall where you want to just like lay down and quit. Because you just ran out of gas. And this replenishment idea, one of the biggest thing that I learned once I started working with a coach, Zach Bitter, ahead of my first 100K, that one I had a plan, I ran the plan. I hit the wall, but it was only because I took a wrong turn at mile 58, and it added about 4 miles to my day. And it was during those last 4 miles that I ended up just crashing, which was unfortunate, but whatever. But this idea of replenishment is something that Zach's helped me with, is that if what I had done previously is I go out too hard and I'm running too fast and I'm basically trying to win, I have this mentality where I'm going to win. And even though I'm not that fast. I'm not at all that fast, but it's just a mindset thing, right? That we push too hard and we bonk. And what he helped me understand was that if I could keep my heart rate in a certain range, then what I managed to do is avoid burning my fuel reserves in a way that nutrition and hydration cannot replenish. That if I can keep it in zone 2, then I'm going to be able to replenish in a way that I can keep going. I can keep doing that. Whereas what I learned is that I have about an hour in a day where I can be basically like above a heart rate of 150, effectively 155 or so. And once I've spent more than an hour at that level, I can't get that back. I'm going to need to rest. Like I can't replenish that with nutrition, with hydration. So one thing that Big D's Backyard Ultra helps with is that it gives us that opportunity to replenish like every time we're going around, and just that mentality of, you finish in 45 minutes, you have 10 minutes, you can go get a good drink, get some nutrition, get some food in you. See if you can't run that loop at a level of sustainability where you are going to be able to replenish. Whereas, and I mean, could talk about sleep when it comes to regular life, and that you don't do a whole lot of sleeping during this event, but putting yourself in a position where you're not wearing yourself down so much that you can't replenish. Number 3, there's no prize for first. That, as I mentioned, for the 24-hour event, the goal is just to finish that 24th loop. And everybody who finishes that 24th loop wins, effectively, or finishes. They probably don't even call it winning. And so there's that. Every time you go out, there's no prize for being the first one back. You don't even need to worry about that. And I think about that in the context of what we do online, that we're constantly in danger of comparing to how other people are doing. People with more followers, people with more engagement. Look at how many impressions that post got. And the bottom line is, am I allowed to use colorful language on this podcast? Am I? Yeah? Okay. It doesn't fucking matter how you finished on that loop. Doesn't matter. You could finish in 58 minutes and feel like hell, or you could finish in 30 minutes moving like a gazelle. That rhymed. Very nice. And you did the same thing. Like, both those people did what they set out to do. They finished the loop, and then you get ready for the next one. So just taking that mentality of winning, or that you need to be fast, or that being fast is better. It's not even true or a given that being fast is better than being slow, because you don't get a prize for being the first one done. Like, the goal is that you're putting yourself in a position that you're going to be able to step back up to the starting line so that you're ready the next time the bell goes. And that's something that we have to keep in mind when it comes to playing this long game online. You don't want to wear yourself out. Try and think like more is better, faster is better, covering more ground is better, more comments, more posts, that's a good way to burn yourself out. No prize for finishing first. All right, number 4. Again, in the similar ballpark. What this structure allows you to do is think in terms of, I was thinking of it as seasons. When I'm preparing for, let's say, a 100K race, again, there are different sections. When I think about my first 100K that I ran in the Rockies outside Colorado Springs, there was like the first 6 miles before you head up into the mountains. Then there was mile like 6 to 13 where you're heading up, and then you get to the peak of Mount Rosa. And then from 13 to 20, and on and on and on. You kind of chunk it out that way, but it's all one thing, right? And this goes hand in hand with the idea of resets. But when you think about an event like Big D's, and I think this is true for what we're doing online when it comes to our content, our branding, and building that magnetic online presence, you're able to plan for each individual loop. Each one can be its own thing, where, let's say, loops 1 through 5, the first 20 miles or so that I'm going to cover out here, let's say that I aim to finish those in between 48 and 50 minutes. So coming at about a 12-minute pace, which, so I know that's in that zone too. Like, I don't have to work too hard on my body to finish a 4.1 mile loop in that amount of time. And then that gives me some time to, again, replenish. It also allows for, if something goes wrong on one of the loops, I have a little bit of trouble, maybe there's a bathroom emergency, that I'm not going to get myself disqualified or knocked out of the race because I cut it too close, just taking it too easy. But then as I go on, like, what do loops 15 to 20 look like? That knowing that by then I'm going to be tired. My body's tired. It's going to be nighttime. It's going to be dark. I will probably want to go to sleep. And just understanding that that's going to be a more difficult season. Loops 15 to 20, those are going to be more difficult. So what do I need to plan for? What do I need to prepare for to give myself the best chance to make it through those loops as well? That not all the loops are created equal. That loop 1 and loop 22 are going to feel very different, most likely. But that the goal here is that we're trying to make it to be still standing at the end of loop 24. And so this idea that by breaking it down that way, and I think when it comes to what we're doing online, breaking down what you're doing I was going to say the month. I've never been able to be that strategic and that planned. I'm doing well when I can plan like 3 days out in advance, but let's take it by week. And if you're trying to post twice a week, that you're able to look ahead and say, okay, what do I have going on next week, the week after that, the week after that? And you can see kind of what's coming down the pike, and you can plan for it, right? You can prepare for the contingencies and the demands on your time, and just know this is going to be a tough week. This is going to be one where I have more bandwidth, And so you're able to maybe push harder during those weeks where you have less going on, and then give yourself more grace to take it easier, to move slower, to be more methodical in how you go about it on those harder weeks, in those more difficult seasons when other things are going on, because you're tired, or you haven't had enough to eat, or it's the middle of the night. Counting for seasons. Our first 4. Number 1, you got resets. 2, you can replenish. 3, there's no prize for first. 4, think in terms of seasons. And then the last one, I think of as the competition is not your competition. And this speaks to what I said earlier about, there's no prize for first. But I talk about how LinkedIn is best played as a team sport. And one thing that I love about trail running, ultra running, folks are really nice. That when you're out there, very few of the people in a given race are there trying to win the race. That most people are out there basically just competing with themselves. That's always the case for me, for sure. And so there's a camaraderie and a generosity, just a friendliness in those groups that's really delightful. It's really lovely. That dynamic is amplified when there really is not a winner. So you take this 24-hour event. Typically when you get up to a starting line, it happens once, and there's a lot of adrenaline pumping, and you're looking around and you're just sizing people up. I think it's just natural. It could just be me. It could just be my idiosyncrasies, but I think that's just the natural thing that happens. And in this sort of thing, again, like, you're going to step up to that starting line over and over and over and over. And every time you do that, you're doing it with the same people, and nobody's going to win that lap. Like, the goal is that y'all make it through, and you're still standing on the back end of it, and you're ready to do the next one. And so thinking about, there's this dynamic out on LinkedIn, and particularly with people who start businesses out there, like posted the other day about a LinkedIn nerd buddy of mine, Adam Noor, who's just technically sort of a competitor in that we're both LinkedIn ghostwriters, but also we have a lot of affinity for we have a whole lot in common. That when I think about he understands what I'm going through and where I'm at and the challenges, and there's just a natural affinity that emerges when people are similarly situated, commiserating, as it were. So in this structure, every hour you're put back at that starting line with everybody else you're competing against. But it's so much clearer that you're not actually competing with everybody else. And this is true out there on LinkedIn as well. You are not competing with everybody else. Right? That mentality that I have to get more impressions, I have to post more, I have to get more engagement, I have to get a bigger follower count than everybody else. That mentality is really unhelpful. I would argue it's really unhealthy. That comparison trap of looking at what other people are doing just doesn't help us get where we're trying to go. Doesn't feel good. And so when we can shift that mindset to saying, I'm out here against you, but we're in this together, that feels a lot better too. So I've been rolling for 25 minutes. I think that's about enough time me jabbering about this, but I hope you found this at least mildly interesting. I'll recap it one more time, that when we're talking about LinkedIn and building your magnetic online presence, this is not a marathon. It is a Big D's backyard ultra, in the sense that when we're showing up out here in this digital arena, we are able to reset. You're able to take a break. Number 2, you're able to replenish. Not only are you able to, you need to. It's like, step away, take time, do what you need to do to be able to come back at your best. 3, there's no prize for first. Pushing yourself as hard as you can isn't going to get you much. 4, think in terms of seasons. Be realistic about what you've got going on, what you're able to contribute, what you're able to sustain. And then 5, the competition is not the competition. That those other people out there, you want those people to be on your side, or you at least want to think about it that way. It's better for you. I think it's probably better for your content, and it increases the chances that you're going to be standing at the end of the event, because we're not running a race out here, are we? All right. enough out of me. Thank you for listening. You know what to do. If you wouldn't mind smashing that like button, the reviews really help on your podcast app of choice. And if you want to check out more of what we're doing at Contender, I've got the linked legal memberships for one for lawyers and one for legal vendors. I'm trying to build the most dynamic, most supportive networks within the LinkedIn network out here. That you can check that out in the show notes. And depending on when you're listening to it, I bet we are recruiting for our next linked legal boot camps, which are kind of sprints focused on developing skills and strengthening our networks as we play this game together. See you out there.